everybody, and welcome back to my top 100 board games of all time. This video is the third installment, so it will cover game 80 all the way up to number 71. Now before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Also, be sure to check out my new game THALAMUS and send me an email if you want to secure yourself a copy. But let's get started on the top 100. At number 80, I have Mexica, which is my favourite of the Mask series by Wolfgang Kramer. This one, the most abstracted of the bunch, as you are carving up this island, trying to create different areas to try and control by erecting these pyramids. I do love the fact that in order to contribute influence in these different regions, you need to physically have your pawn there, and you are using your pawn to kind of sail down the rivers, teleport from one place to another, using action points as your allowance basically. So you have to be very efficient with how you plan your turns. Yes, there's some scope for some nastiness, and there's also some scope for AP, but the game itself is excellent, and I like how each game feels so different. So a very cutthroat, competitive, area majority game, but it is fantastic fun. So that is Mexica at number 80. At number 79, I have Ohanami, which is a very unassuming small box card game where you are participating in a closed draft, taking cards and trying to play those cards into columns. Now you have 3 columns to play with, and you also have 2 bits of information to consider when you play these cards. Number 1 is the card type, because all these cards score in different ways. Now generally they'll just score you points, but some will score more frequently than others, and some are just simply based on a set collection sliding scale method. But the twist on this game is that each of these cards has a unique number, and when you add these to your columns, you always have to play higher than the highest card or lower than the lowest card, meaning that if you create big gaps in between those numbers, you cannot any longer slot cards in between those gaps. So sometimes you have to take a gamble thinking, yes, this is the card I really want, but it's going to create a big gap. So am I going to shoot myself in the foot later, and so on? And I really do like the way that as the game progresses, it really starts to strangle you and gets really tight, and that kind of tension of if you'll be able to play a card at all will start to shine through. An excellent little game, criminally underrated. That is Ohanami at number 79. At number 78, I have Brass Birmingham. So super popular game, of course, the number 1 rated game on Board Game Geek. Quite a heavy involved Euro as you are trying to build these buildings on this map. Each building comes with resources on them, which you are kind of trying to use in order to flip your buildings over to start generating points. I love the kind of shared economy in this game, as the market is constantly increasing or decreasing in value. You can use other people's resources, connecting routes together and so on. So highly interactive, but not necessarily in a mean way. And those are the kind of Euros I tend to like, these harmoniously competitive yet interactive games. I love the hand management system in this game, as you have to carefully plan how to use these cards in order to get to the right towns, the right buildings down, and so on. So lots going on here. It's number 1 for a reason. The reason it's fallen is because I feel like I've played this enough now to kind of get my fix from it. Now, objectively, it is a fantastic game, but the desire to play it has slightly fallen. But it's a difficult one to rate because the game is that good, but the desire has kind of lessened over time. But that is Brass Birmingham at number 78. At number 77, I have Dvonn, which is my favourite game from the GIF series of abstract strategy games. This one, so elegant, as you are populating this big kind of long board of these tokens, and then on your turn you are moving a stack of those tokens of your colour a number of spaces equal to the height of that stack, and then landing on another piece, trying to have your piece on top of as many piles as possible, really. But there are twists on this game where if you are no longer connected to one of these red pieces on the board, then that whole section of tiles or tokens will be removed from the board completely. So I love that idea of being able to mess around with your opponent, being able to create these traps so that you can make these big moves and take off half the board. in a single move. Very dynamic, it can quite brain burnery, but it's such a wonderful abstract strategy game and my favourite of the bunch, which says a lot because all the games are pretty excellent. So that is Dvonn at number 77. At number 76, I have Scout, another small box card game. This one's more of a shedding game as you are trying to create these runs of cards. The twist on this game is you cannot manipulate the cards once they're in your hands. They are going to stay in a fixed order, but you have the potential to take previously played cards and slot them in the gaps between those cards to try and create longer runs. A really good back and forth in this game as you are trying to, again, build up those hands, constantly trying to trump your opponent. I really like the flow of this one. And I'm really glad to see this one has got the wind under its sails, because there was a time where this wasn't as popular as it was, and I thought, how is this game flying under the radar? But now it has really blown up and people are really starting to see the quality of gameplay here, and it is one of the best card games out there. So that is Scout at number 76. At number 75, I have Marabunta, which was one of my favourite games from last year. Now this is a two-player only kind of roll and write area control style game, as you'd expect, rolling a bunch of dice. You're drafting those dice in order to kind of populate this communal map to try and control the majority of those spaces. But you are also trying to increase the yield of points that the different areas will grant you if you control them at the end of the game. You're unlocking player powers as you go, you're blocking players off and so on. So a really interactive game, as you'd expect with a two-player game. But I love how those different mechanisms or different facets of the game are blended with each other. Area control games generally don't work for two players, but this is a perfect example of how to make it work. And everything is so inviting at all times. A wonderful game. Again, I'm surprised this one hasn't taken off more than it has, because it is an excellent design by the great Dr. Rainer Knizia. So that is Marabunta at number 75. At number 74, I have World Exchanges, which I feel is one of the most unique games I know, as you are basically trying to plot out this kind of graph, I suppose, as the game goes on by buying and selling these location cards. Now, the objective of the game is to try and get as much money as you can by buying these different kind of real estate, but also trying to keep your balance sheet as high as possible. But sometimes you are rewarded to spend quite a bit of money, because you'll hit these certain checkpoints or even these public objectives to get you even more points at the end of the game. It really is a balancing act of trying to keep enough money to play with, but not spending, well, not having too much money, so if you take any more money in, then you cannot actually have anywhere to store it. So again, a really cool game of trying to, thread that needle and keep everything perfectly balanced. So fast, some crunchy decisions, some good interaction as that market is so dynamic and properties are switching between you and your opponents. Just an excellent one, really, and another one that I feel is so overlooked. So that is World Exchanges at number 74. At number 73, I have Air, Land and Sea. This is another two-player only game, but it is a tug-of-war style game, as you are playing these cards from your hand into one of three different theatres of war, Air, Land and Sea, or with the expansion, you've got some other ones as well. And what you're trying to do is you are trying to have the highest number of kind of influence in those regions, but each of these cards has a special ability linked to it, which can, of course, completely throw the normal games of the rules of the games out the window, as you can break rules and flip cards over and swap cards and so on. So a game that has tons of synergies and cool combos. And my favourite thing about this game is the scoring mechanism, where if you feel that things aren't necessarily going your way, you can retreat from the round and offer fewer points to your opponent. And the earlier you retreat, you are going to give fewer points away. And if you, of course, fight to the bitter end, then you're going to throw a huge swing of points to the winner of that round. So I love that extra decision, and I think more games should use that if you think that the deck of cards is just stacked against you. So that is Air, Land and Sea at number 73. At number 72, I have Sylla. Now this is a dry, dusty Euro where you are trying to collect these tokens and push up the value of the tokens you've collected based on this kind of commodity speculation mechanism. It's quite a formulaic game, but I do like each of those phases as you are kind of building up a crew of these characters which will influence different phases of the game. But in order to use that influence in certain things, you're going to have to sacrifice their ability to acquire new buildings and tiles to make your engine better, basically. Lots of blind bidding in this game as you are trying to vie for majorities, trying to bid enough to get to obviously win the round and get some extra bonuses, but not too much where you're overspending. And that's pretty much the crux of the game. Lots of engine building, lots of collecting tiles, lots of blind bidding, and those are three things that I really do enjoy. So that is Sylla. I definitely don't bypass this one based on the that dry, dusty Euro look. It's not not the best looker in the game, but it is a fantastic game in terms of gameplay. So again, Sylla at number 72. And the final game for this video at number 71, I have Havalandi. So this is one of the newest Knizia route building style games, as you are trying to build up chains of these hot air balloons by venturing into different territories and then launching those fleets to score as many points as possible. There are also some public objectives to try and aim towards. And this game is probably one of the most polarizing of the Knizia route building style games, because you do have kind of less control as comparing it to some of those others, because it does have this kind of roll and move mechanism as you are moving this hot air balloon around the edge of the board, and you can only ever deploy hot air balloons in that particular kind of row or line that hot air balloon has landed on. So you don't have a terrible amount of control here, but I actually do like the way that the game kind of keeps you on the straight and narrow and forces you to make a decision within a confined space. Again, people are going to bounce off this one because they might think that's going to play too much of a part, but I personally like it. It's very charming. There's some different options you can go for, as I mentioned, by launching those fleets, by populating certain areas of the board, by going next to these pavilions, and of course reaching for those public objectives. And nobody does that idea of pulling you in different directions quite like the Good Doctor. So that is Havalandi at number 71. So there we have it. That concludes another portion of my top 100. Hopefully you have enjoyed it and discovered a game or two. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other video too, and of course keep your eye out for the remainder of the series. For everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.